This is CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the program. Our top stories: Israel claims its ground troops are moving in on Hamas targets in Gaza City as the Palestinian death toll continues to rise. In Israel, a silence to mark the victims of the Hamas attacks 1 month on. Germany agrees tougher migration policies amid a rise in support for the far right. And more than skin deep, how the cosmetics industry in France hopes to iron out those blemishes in international trade. It's 1 month since Hamas launched those deadly attacks on Israel, sparking an intense bombardment and ground assault on the Gaza Strip. Israel's military says its troops are inside Gaza City and have taken control of a Hamas hideout, with plans to attack fighters underground. In southern Gaza, Israeli airstrikes reportedly killed at least 23 people. The head of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, said that the territory is becoming a graveyard for children. The UN has called the situation in Gaza a tragedy of colossal proportions, where people are denied aid while being killed and bombed in their homes. Gaza's health ministry, which is run by Hamas, says at least 10,328 people have now been killed in the territory, including 4,237 children, while 25,000 have been injured. Hamas officials say hospitals are receiving 1 injured person every minute and 15 bodies every hour. They also say that on average 6 children and 5 women are killed every hour. The bombardment of Gaza began after Hamas launched an unprecedented attack on Israel on the 7th of October, killing at least 1,400 people and taking 242 hostages, including children and elderly people. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Noor Harazin, who's watching events for us in Gaza. Noor, first of all, let's talk about this fighting reportedly in and around the Al-Shifa hospital, where Israel claims that Hamas has underground headquarters.
Well, actually, today, in a statement for Salama Maruf, who is the spokesperson of the governmental media office here in Gaza, and also in his statement 2 days ago, they asked and they called upon the whole world actually to send a team of experts to investigate the fact that there is no Hamas headquarters under the Al-Shifa hospital. There is no tunnels. However, Israel totally ignored this request by Hamas, and since 2 days actually, and they have been heavily targeting and striking around the Al-Shifa hospital. One of the airstrikes actually hit the solar plant boards on top of the Al-Shifa hospital, and the Al-Shifa hospital is not the only hospital in the Gaza City under the Israeli fire. We're also talking about the Indonesian hospital, which is located in northern Gaza, the Al-Quds hospital in Tel El-Hawa neighborhood, and also a complex of hospitals in Al-Nasr Street. We're talking about the Al-Nasr Children's Hospital, the Eye Hospital, and also the RNTC Hospital. This hospital, the RNTC Hospital, is specialized in treating children with cancer, and today this hospital was warned several times, and the doctors were working on evacuating the children in the hospital.
What more do we know about these bombings in southern Gaza?
Here in Gaza, I mean, since I personally and have been Israeli southern Gaza.
Well, look, I'm going to cut in there because, as you can see, we're losing the line to Gaza for the usual reasons, the difficulties of getting communications lines out of Gaza. We'll try and return to our correspondent, Noor Harazin, a little later in the programme. Let's carry on with the rest of today's news. And a moment of silence has been held across Israel to commemorate the victims of the Hamas attacks a month ago. A day of mourning was marked with the singing of the national anthem. Flags were flown at half-mast, and people lit candles to remember those who died, as well as those still being held hostage. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he may consider short pauses in the fighting to allow for humanitarian aid to enter Gaza, but only in exchange for hostage releases. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Sarah, today, a month on, what's the mood like among Israelis?
Well, look, Jamie, I've been here on the ground now for that month, and I've been speaking to many, many people. The one thing I can tell you is there is immense sadness. There's also a feeling of hopelessness, but there's also a feeling of absolute anger at the Netanyahu government that firstly, it didn't stop these attacks on October 7 to begin with, and also that it is seen to not be doing enough to have these 242 hostages that do remain inside the Gaza Strip released. We've just got these pictures playing now of these people in Jerusalem. They've been holding vigils for these souls that are trapped inside Gaza, demanding that the Netanyahu government do more, saying they will not leave their posts, sitting outside there until they see some concrete action. Now, it seems that potentially the Netanyahu government may be listening, but it's yet to be seen whether this is enough. You talked about these small temporary pauses that could potentially allow for these hostages to come out of the Strip and also for more aid to go into the Strip. But it's yet to be seen when they are implemented and for just how long.
And what more has Benjamin Netanyahu been saying about Gaza?
Well, look, he came out in this television interview overnight to the American network ABC, saying that Israel will have overall security responsibilities in Gaza for an indefinite period. Didn't really say too much more, so we don't know whether this would mean actual boots on the ground in the Gaza Strip. We're talking here about a post-Hamas Gaza, which has been widely spoken about. These comments from Netanyahu really mean that these prospects of a two-state solution, which have very much been discussed also with the United States, could potentially be put on ice. And look, this is something that the Biden administration has really been pushing for. The president came out to say that that this would potentially be when the crisis is over, there has to be a vision of what comes next. He said, and in our view, it has to be a two-state solution. And this was also echoed by the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. He said he described this as the best path and maybe even the only path. So we're yet to hear what the United States has to say about that. Although we did hear from the security advisor, he said there obviously has to be a way forward after this, but it really puts all of this into disarray. No one knows where we're going, and it certainly is a big mess as to what happens to Gaza post-Hamas, if indeed the Israeli military achieves its goal in wiping out Hamas.
Sarah, thank you for that. Our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Let's see if we can take you back to Gaza now, and our correspondent Noor Harazin. We've been struggling with what are obviously difficult communications for obvious reasons, and I think we've lost her again. So we may have another go before the end of the programme, but I think for the moment we will carry on with the rest of today's news now. I'm hoping we can talk to Ibrahim Jalal, non-resident scholar and research fellow at the Middle East Institute in Washington. Ibrahim, welcome. Well, it's a terrible anniversary, 4 weeks in, a month of this shuttle diplomacy, all the international efforts to broker any sort of ceasefire or even peace have failed. It's made no difference. Where does this go next, in your judgment?
Thanks for having me. I'm afraid the current landscape remains in the making. We have seen no desire, no political willingness to sort of wind down the madness of the indiscriminate bombardment of Gaza, or even easing the siege of a 2.3 people. And that's very alarming because we've seen also the ground incursion or offensive was not necessarily declared publicly, but was already by de facto rules of engagement happening, did not lead to a significant breakthrough. What this landscape at the moment signals is a protracted warfare and we've seen guerrilla warfares take longer times. But even more alarming, with the anniversary now, we have 2,000 dead people, 40% of which are children. If we, translate this number, it would be 333 people every day. That's about 14 people killings every day. That's just very inhuman. And at the moment, even the flow of humanitarian goods trucks, the numbers have been very shy and have been far from any adequate, address of the situation. Food, medic, fuel, and all humanitarian necessities have been below the bar. And that means that the longer the ground offensive continues, even as bombardment intensifies, the humanitarian crisis will continue to deteriorate in front of our eyes. And that means that the world is failing to respond, as we've seen in the United Nations Security Council just over the past couple of weeks.
Pressure is mounting on Israel, intense pressure for a ceasefire. Is there any hope of that?
We certainly must continue to have our hope, as people with clear moral compass, as states, but the pressure must double down, because at the moment it has proved that it's inadequate, both at the Arab level, at the Islamic level, or even at the level of the United Nations more broadly. And that will take more diplomatic coordination between Arab and Islamic states, but also closer coordination with their Western friends. Dozens of millions around the world, as we've seen, have rallied for an immediate ceasefire and an end to this inhuman targeting of civilians in Gaza, from New York to London and Istanbul to Amman and Sana'a. And this now is a clear call for a permanent end to this, madness, and rather than a tactical ceasefire or a humanitarian pause, because a humanitarian pause is not humanitarian for the people of Gaza. And that must be accompanied also by the revival of a peace process. Other than that, it seems that the intent to conduct further damage, as seen by an Israeli minister's statement to use nuclear bombing, is a very clear show of intent of the damage possible.
It's been 4 weeks now. I mean, what do you think the chances are of this turning into a wider regional conflict?
The region is very fragile, as we've seen. We've seen Iran's axis of resistance posture through symbolic attacks into and around Israel, but also, targeting of U.S. military bases here and there. So at the moment, it appears that the recipe for conflict spillover is very much alive. There is restraint and control to an extent, but if this continues to drag further, many are afraid that this would not hold longer. And if that's the case, many countries on the borders, such as Egypt, Jordan, and around, might be drawn into an unnecessary engagement where you have, the proliferating non-state actors who have conventional and non-conventional capabilities can do so much mess beyond what we know at the moment. That could be very scary. I think as much as a control of the spillover is necessary, a control and end to this genocidal warfare is necessary equally.
Ibrahim, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for coming on the programme. We'll speak again, no doubt. Ibrahim Jalal from the Middle East Institute in Washington. I'm going to just give one more go and another chance for us to try and get back to Gaza, because we're keen to talk to our correspondent, Noor Harazin. Noor, I was asking you earlier on, before we got cut off, what more do we know about these bombings in southern Gaza?
Well, bombings in southern Gaza did not stop since day one. Actually, it is as dangerous as northern Gaza. Here, I am standing inside Shuhada al-Aqsa Hospital. I myself evacuated northern Gaza around 25 days ago, and every day here, being in southern Gaza, we witness Israeli attacks, continuous Israeli attacks. Tens, if not hundreds, of people arrived here to the Shuhada al-Aqsa Hospital. As I said in the beginning, the situation is as dangerous, and actually, in the recent statistics by the Palestinian Health Ministry, they said that 42% of the people killed in the Gaza Strip over the past 4 weeks are actually from southern Gaza, or people that evacuated their homes from in southern Gaza. However, yes, we have a number of people that are still very keen to evacuate northern Gaza. They are taking the safety road, which is Salah ad-Din Road. It's a 3 on your feet. It is hard, especially for the children and for the elderly. However,
I think we're going to leave Noor Harazin there in Gaza. I think we got the gist of what she was saying, but my apologies for the breakup on the signal there, which you'll understand for obvious reasons, given the difficulty of what's going on in Gaza at the moment. Protesters have taken to the streets of Tokyo to demand a ceasefire in Gaza as a meeting of G7 foreign ministers gets underway in Japan's capital. Ministers from the group of 7 wealthy countries are discussing the conflict as well as the war in Ukraine. They include US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, fresh from his diplomatic tour of the Middle East. The UK and Japan have said they will cooperate on humanitarian pauses in Gaza. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi says he hopes Ireland can play a constructive role in promoting China-EU relations in a meeting with the Irish Deputy Prime Minister Micheál Martin in Beijing. Wang stressed that cooperation between Beijing and Brussels is far greater than competition. Martin says Ireland wants to maintain and strengthen its economic relationship with China. Italy's government has announced plans for reception centres to be built in Albania to host migrants arriving by sea. The facilities are set to open next spring and are expected to process 36,000 people each year. Migrants rescued by Italian boats in the Mediterranean will be sent to Albania, but not those who arrive on Italian shores. Germany's Chancellor has agreed on tougher migration policies to try and curb support for the far right. Olaf Scholz said the package of measures would include cutting welfare payments for asylum seekers and more financial aid for regions hosting refugees. Well, let's speak to our correspondent Trent Murray in Berlin. Trent, this cabinet meeting, went on into the early hours of this morning, didn't it? What were the arguing points? What were the sticking points?
Yeah, that's right, Jamie. And not uncommon for those meetings to often run over time. These meetings between the Chancellor and the state leaders of Germany's 16 different states. That is largely because really when you put 17 politicians in a room, all from different political parties with much diversity of opinion, things can run over. But we know that this is one of the most pressing but also prickly challenges, not just for Olaf Scholz, but also a number of those regional leaders which say that their regions are struggling with a large intake of asylum seekers, and services like schools and hospitals and accommodation are struggling to deal with those numbers. What we know is that this historic agreement, Olaf Scholz's words, not mine, essentially is a suite of new policies just to try and make Germany less attractive to potential migrants. These measures include speeding up deportations for people that have had their asylum claim rejected, a new promise to make sure that cases are heard within 6 months, including any appeals. We also know that the time that it will take for somebody to be eligible for state benefits will now double to 36 months. Border checks will remain on the Polish, Swiss and Czech border, and there will of course be tougher penalties for people involved in the people smuggling trade. What wasn't agreed, interestingly, though, was a joint effort for the potential panel to examine what is offshore processing, essentially processing asylum claims in third countries. We know Olaf Scholz was in Nigeria last week. This was one of the issues he discussed with leadership down there, the idea of maybe Germany almost adopting the UK's Rwanda-style approach to processing claims offshore. No agreement yet on that here within Germany, but certainly these measures are seen as a real effort by the government to try and toughen up its immigration rules, and it does really mark a sharp turn to what we've seen in the past.
Well, it really does, doesn't it? I mean, this is a U-turn from what was seen as something of an open-door policy under the former Chancellor Angela Merkel. What's changed?
Well, I think there are two things, really. It's the practicality of it all. We know that roughly 50% of German municipalities say that they are either overburdened or in emergency mode when it comes to asylum seekers coming to their regions. What they mean by that is they are just struggling to find accommodation to house all of these people. And also, we know that this year the numbers are just way up. So what I can tell you is that, according to the government's press conference last night, 220,000 people have already made an asylum claim this year, within the first 9 months of this year. That is already well beyond the total number seen last year in the entirety of the year. So we've still got several months to go. That number will increase. It doesn't include the 1 million Ukrainians that are here. They are not here technically as asylum seekers because, as you would be aware, the EU effectively opened the door for people to come from Ukraine. But just briefly, there are politics at play here. The Alternative for Deutschland, the AfD far-right party, is well on the march. It is second now consistently in the polls. And Chancellor Scholz's centre-left government knows that it needs to do something to try and stem the bleeding in many ways from the support that it is seeing collapse from within its own ranks.
Trent, thank you for that. Our correspondent Trent Murray in Berlin. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, playing catch-up to China, India, the United States and Russia. Europe finally joins the new space race.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Israel claims its ground troops are moving in on Hamas targets in Gaza City as the Palestinian death toll continues to rise. Our other headlines: in Israel, a silence to mark the victims of the Hamas attacks 1 month on from their deaths. And Germany agrees tougher migration policies amid a rise in the support for the far right. Companies from around the world are showing their products at the China International Import Expo in Shanghai as the latest data shows more goods are being brought into China from overseas. Imports were up 3% in October compared to a year earlier at almost $220 billion, but exports fell more than 6% to around $270 billion. Many French cosmetics companies are showing their stuff at China's International Trade Fair, but regulations have tarnished the ability of French brands to capitalize on this huge market. Now the two countries have pledged to work together to try to improve regulation. Our correspondent Will Denslow reports.
They say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and for many, French cosmetic brands are the fairest of them all. The stores on the iconic Champs-Élysées in Paris attract visitors from around the world.
The French women, they are elegant and they are, the image is very beautiful.
People always use these foreign brands, so maybe I will choose. And I believe this the quality of this brand.
The Chinese market has become increasingly important. According to French officials, China accounts for roughly 35% of the revenue of many French cosmetic companies.
We've seen that since years that French brands, cosmetic groups are doing a lot of effort to be more locally targeted to satisfy local consumers.
China is the world's second biggest cosmetics market, behind the US. It's predicted to generate roughly $60 billion next year, and analysts expect growth to continue.
According to the 2023 Business of Fashion and McKinsey State of Fashion report, the Chinese beauty industry is expected to be worth around $96 billion by 2027. That's an attractive prospect for many French brands. Sephora now has more than 200 stores in China, as it seeks to turn heads in that market.
But a strict regulatory environment has been a fly in the ointment for some companies. China still requires animal testing on certain cosmetics, including hair dye and sun cream. And companies must divulge a full list of ingredients, including precise quantities for their products. Some believe this risks goods being mimicked, but advocates say it protects consumers. While China and France may not see eye to eye on everything, the two nations say they're committed to levelling the playing field in the cosmetics sector. Next year, a French embassy for the cosmetics industry will be established in China.
Our companies that are located around Shanghai or somewhere else in China will be together in a network to promote, of course, Made in France in China, but also to develop more collaboration with our Chinese partners.
Imports of beauty products from France to China fell by more than 6% in the first half of this year, compared to the same period in 2022. Domestic brands are gaining market share in China, and some experts say there's nothing wrong with established French brands facing a little healthy competition. William Denslow, CGTN, Paris.
The European Space Agency has decided to throw its hat into the ring and join the space race. However, China, the United States, India and Russia are well ahead, begging the question, can Europe catch up? Our correspondent Ken Brown reports.
Well, the European Space Agency has finally decided to take the new space race in earnest and has taken one small step towards independent missions carrying astronauts. The problem is that Europe is playing catch-up to countries like China, India, the US and Russia. It has a launcher crisis and the Ariane 6 rocket will not make its maiden flight until 2024, years behind schedule. The only launchers in Europe are now Russian rockets, but with the conflict in the Ukraine, that's no longer an option. The ESA's solution is to turn to the private sector, a bit like NASA did with Elon Musk's SpaceX, and today they announced a competition between innovative European companies to build a spaceship by 2028 that can take cargo to the International Space Station and back down to Earth. ESA Chief Joseph Asbacher talked on Monday at the two-day summit in Seville about the new economy developing in low Earth orbit, adding that private companies are revolutionizing space exploration. Cargo journeys are the first step towards manned flights, and Asbacher announced that $80 million had been secured to fund the first phase of the project, a fund which companies will also contribute to. Asbacher also urged Europe to be more ambitious with space exploration. In April, for example, an ESA-commissioned report called for Europe to establish a sustained presence on the moon. Ken Brown, CGTN, Madrid.
The headlines again. Israel claims its ground troops are moving in on Hamas targets in Gaza City as the Palestinian death toll continues to rise. Our other headlines: in Israel, a silence to mark the victims of the Hamas attacks 1 month on from their deaths. And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. More news on CGTN Europe's channel, on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more at the top of the hour. Coming up next, World Insight from me. Goodbye.